everybody. Here we are once again at the Mood House, and today is Wednesday, the 18th. Is today the 18th? 18th of January. Here we are, moving in, well into the new year. Question is, when do you stop saying Happy New Year to people?
Never.
You know, I'm about there. I said Happy New Year a couple times. I'm still doing a little bit in emails, but probably this rest of this week. By next week, I probably won't do that. We'll move on to other things. Well, let's turn to Genesis chapter 42. We're making big leaps here. I put this up here, and again, like I've said, several weeks in a row now. See if we're moving here. Is that I realize you can't read this, but it's just for a visual, for comparison. we have looked at all of this in great detail, Jacob's first half of life. We looked at this, the focus of the text, of the narrative is around Jacob and what is happening in and around Jacob's life and his response. It's like a one-to-one relationship. And that is true up until the wrestling of the angel. And then from there, the narrative changes and Jacob becomes part of a much larger story. And I think that's an indicative, and it's a picture of our lives as well. Jacob, in my mind, he falls into something much larger. And that's how the narrative is moving. Now, again, you can't read this, but wherever you see the yellow, that's where we are. And so as we move downward, we're getting closer to the end. This represents Genesis 50. That's the end of the story. So we're going to move and pick areas of movement. Well, we're looking at 2 chapters today, not in any detail whatsoever. I've picked two specific short passages to read, one out of 42, one out of 43. And we're looking at this section with the idea of snapshots. We looked at the first snapshot, photographs. And so I'm creating a verbal visual of a photograph of an image of how we're looking at this text. And this morning's is snapshot 2 out of Genesis 42 through 43:15. So we're going to create one snapshot this morning, and this puts it in context to where we are. So first of all, this is a diagram that I've created now after weeks and weeks of thinking about Jacob and how I think this is a model for manhood. The male journey is how I look at this. And the red question this morning, the one I had last week, is where is Jacob? Well, I would put Jacob over in this section here. But the mystery is, this is so linear, it's so predictable, and life is not like that. So there's some question about this way of descent, this way of wisdom, this idea of letting go, and what does letting go look like? We expect a clean line. We expect that once Jacob has a transformational experience, the wrestling of the angel, it's happily ever after, and his actions then become very predictable, in sync with how we would expect a godly man to react, a man who has been transformed. That is not the case, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And it engages me and it engages us to ask these questions, and so that's what we're doing is, we clearly know that this part of life is about letting go. It's no longer about ascending and building and conquering. It's about releasing control. But what does that look like? And it's something you and I work with every day. We're asking these questions, maybe not cognizantly, but you catch yourself, gee, why did I react that way? We know what it's like letting go, but none of us here in this room are perfect at it. And neither was Jacob. And that's what our journey and our discovery and our adventure is about right now. So here is the picture, not much of a picture. It's all just gray. And I'm gonna paint verbally the images within the photograph. I'm gonna attempt to anyway. And this particular photograph is different than last week because it's a split photograph. And a split photograph, you've got first half, and then a movement. You've got this no man's land, and then a movement into the second half. So I'm going to build this photograph like a split photograph. You've sometimes seen this in movies or in television where they use, a video frame up here and it's informing this frame down here. That's the idea of what we're talking about. And what's separating this is time. There is an initial response here that we're going to look at. There is a no man's land, a waiting period, and then there's a second response. So in the first response here, where we begin, it's out of 42, 1 through 38. The key text, and I'm going to ask somebody to read it, 42, 36 through 38. So could somebody read that text?
Their father Jacob said to them, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. Now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Then Reuben said to his father, "You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back."
Okay.
Okay. Then there's 38 next one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I got it.
But Jacob said, "My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he's the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you're taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow."
Okay, yeah, I got excited there, but that verse 38 is the key text. So the context of this reading is now there is famine in the land. And people are looking, where do we find food? Well, word was that in Egypt there were all kinds of food. Why? Because Joseph was there and he had the dream and informed Pharaoh to create 7 years of storage so that the 7 years of famine we could get through it. I mean, it's this huge story. So Jacob's family is in Egypt, and Jacob says, in Canaan, Jacob tells his sons, go to Egypt to buy grain. So they go down there, and they meet Joseph, who they don't know who he is, but he knows who they are. And that's the wonderful story of Joseph. And in that whole process, he doesn't reveal who he is initially, but it says in the text he tests them. We're not going to go into a lot of the story, although it's a beautiful story. But what happens is that he acts like he's accusing them of stealing, like he doesn't trust them. They divulge the fact. He asks about Joseph asks about their father. He wants to know about their father. Yes, he's living. And so he puts this plan together to get his dad back down to Egypt by holding hostage Simeon. So he creates this whole plan. Simeon is held hostage. The other brothers are going back, and the text that Bill read is now the grown men coming to their father and explaining, we're all here. We have full sacks of grain. All of our money has mysteriously been returned to us. And of course, that's a whole thing. What is God doing here? They're asking the question, what is God doing? There's something very mysterious about this. But only one problem, Dad. We have one brother left in Egypt. So that's the text. And what Joseph had asked is that I want to see Benjamin. I want to see the younger brother. And here in this text, Jacob is saying, there is no way I'm going to send down. I'm going to allow Benjamin to leave. Joseph is dead. Simeon, he goes, Joseph is not in the King James. Simeon is not. I cannot let this go. And everything in the text seems to be focusing. Jacob is very much in the center of his world. And as I've got here, Jacob is speaking. The cupboards are full in this image. Jacob is talking. The cupboards are full. Think of cupboards in a kitchen, because the boys, the sons have returned and they have full sacks of grain. So the cupboards are full now. The cupboards were bare, now the cupboards are full. And there's everything now. Jacob is being asked to sacrifice, to give up. And he says, no way. Because all of the arrows in the picture are pointing towards Jacob, because he is in the center of his world, egocentric, in a sense of, no, this is all happening to me. All happening to me. Why is this happening? Isn't that what you see in the text?
Why me, Lord?
Why me? Yes. Yeah, why me, Lord? And it's exactly where we have all been. And notice the end result, a tight grip. So in the image of the first is Jacob talking. Cupboards are full. It's the context. It's a kitchen. Cupboards are full. Arrows pointing in to Jacob, and a tight grip. You get the picture? You can put that in your head. So as we move, what happens next is what I call impasse. And it starts with Jacob saying, there is no way I'm going to allow Benjamin to leave my sight. The tight grip. No way. The clamp. The clamp that we all know and we've used several times. The clamp, holding on. There is no way that we're going to move beyond this point. Impasse, 43, 1 through 10. And in an impasse, matters only get worse. 43 verse 1. Does somebody want to read that? 43 verse 1.
Now the famine was still severe in the land.
There you go. Nothing. When you're on hold, it matters will only get worse. The severity of the famine and the impact on the cupboards is how that is going to play out. Now in 43, 1 through 10, this matter's getting worse, the pressure increasing. Judah comes to his father with a solution, and basically in a nice way says, if we would have acted back in chapter 42, we wouldn't be in this mess. But we're in this mess. And finally, through Judah's appeal in 43, 1 through 10, Jacob is now in a different state. There's a movement. There's a movement from here, impasse, and now something different here. And in this interaction with his son and the proposal that Judah brings to his father, would somebody read 43, 11 through 14?
Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into your mouths, into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take also your brother and go back to the man at once. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, I am bereaved. I am bereaved.
Okay, what do you see different in the response? What do you see as different from this section of the photograph to the first?
In the first, he saw fatalism and he wasn't going to accept it. The second one, he's prepared to accept fatalism. He's not optimistic.
No.
He's okay, I guess I got to let it go.
Letting go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does letting go look like? We're seeing what letting go looks like. And what is it that occurred? What brought what brought Jacob to this conclusion or this change of heart?
Judah's persuasion, but
Yeah, Judah's persuasion. I think that's part of it. The famine. I think that's a key. The cupboards. You know, something happens to us, guys, when we go to the cupboard every day and our resources start to get depleted. Whatever the cupboard is. It could be our bank account. It could be a relational bank account. It could be our health. As resources, our ability to replenish starts to be depleted, something happens within us and we start to listen. And so I think, yes, Judah's proposal. Now in the previous text, Reuben had a proposal, but you wouldn't hear it. It was a weird proposal, but it was a reactionary proposal. But in Judah's proposal, he says, "I'll do it. You know, I'm going to step up." And of course, there could be a whole character sketch on Judah here that would be fascinating, but we don't have time to go down that one. But here is in this text, it's no longer Jacob speaking. And David, in your reading, doesn't it say Israel?
I don't know, I'm back in
43 verse 11. It's Israel. So remember last time we talked about this movement between Jacob, the use of the word Jacob in the text, in the use of the word Israel. I think now it's by design by the author that now, pay attention, we're talking about a bigger perspective here. We're talking about Jacob speaking from a larger perspective, a more informed perspective, and thus Israel is speaking. And he said, and of course the occasion is the cupboards are empty, the arrows are now vanished. I don't see any egocentrism here. The arrows are gone in this picture. He's looking upward. May God bless you, or may God, what are the words in verse probably 13? May God have compassion. He's looking upward. He's not looking horizontal. And notice his grip has now loosened. He now has a loosened grip. And we discussed why. We looked at the movement from the initial, the impasse, this no man's land, and what has happened here. He's moved from tight grip to loose grip. And there's a correlation, I'd suggest, on the capacity within the cupboard, his own resources. Now, that's it there. Now let's move on, and I'm going to give an explanation why. Or at least this, guys, this is a for what it's worth. I'd love to be able to, as David and I were talking this morning, to be able to lay this out as, you know, here's the linear 4 points, or here's the problem, here's the solution, and here's what you do, 3 or 4 points. Go have a great day. But life does not work like that, and we see it not linear, not predictable, but there are indicators in the text that really draw our attention. And we're asking the questions why. It's not clean, but yet it is so real, and you guys, all of us can relate to this. We catch ourselves in our 50s, in our 60s, and beyond, and we go, God, why am I still like that? But, let me explain my take on this for what it's worth. We have looked at in depth these various stages of growth in Jacob's life. That's what we just finished up. So we're going to go back to that for a moment and look at this in context to what we saw. You see the movement in the photograph. Think Jacob, this is the seasoned Jacob. He's operating out of a stage 4 that and I know David, you haven't been here, but the key action in stage 4, what allows a person to move into the realm of stage 4 as far as an awareness is this idea of embracing the negative for the first time. And in the text, in Jacob's example, I see that when he's overtaken by his father-in-law and he admits fear for the first time. He goes inward and he admits outwardly, I was afraid. That is a huge step in a person's life, when they can finally embrace a negative idea. But because he's in stage 4, that happened back here, this is my belief, guys, for what it's worth. I'm saying he's in a stage of growth and he has little awareness. There's a barrier for him to move to another stage. There's a barrier there. He can't see beyond this, or maybe drawing it a little bit better, he could see somewhat maybe. The line could maybe come back, but it's like inside of a bubble and you can't see beyond it, and he has little awareness of out here. All he can do, it's a big step, embracing awareness. That's the first step towards transformation, but he has little awareness of what's happening here. Okay, so that's the first slide. Again, my explanation. Now, what happens here, or what's happened in his life, is he's moved from stage 4 to stage 5, and that was, in my opinion, the wrestling of the angel. I look at that as a huge transformational time in this man's life. How could you wrestle with the angel of God and go away differently? Well, the text clearly indicates that something dramatically changed in Jacob's life, and I believe that. I believe that, although his examples after that are puzzling, and that's what we're grappling with here. That's what I'm trying to get my arms around here with this story. And I'm looking at it, explanation, with the idea of these stages. He could not see beyond, but when he had the wrestling of the angel, his world got much larger. He stepped into a larger world, a stage 5, and I'm saying that what stage 5 is, the key point of moving into stage 5, is he embraces for the first time his limitations. That's different than this. That's the beginning. And that leads to this, but he's still not there until he, for the first time in his life, he really understands his limitation, and which the story so beautifully depicts. He walks away with a limp. He's been wounded. He has been hurt. And he is reminded of that every day. Believe me, I know what it's like to walk with a limp. And I know every time you walk, every time you take a step on a sore hip, you're reminded of that limitation. And he then moves into this. Now, where I'm going with this is I've got it drawn out that he's growing. There, in his early stages, he was here. He went to stage 4 here, the first stage of this transformation experience. Took a huge step here. So his world has gotten larger. But here's the point. At any given time, any given occasion, Jacob and you and I have the choice to respond at these various levels. Before he had no choice. He had very limited choices because he only was playing with a 1-string guitar or a 1-string violin, Everett. He only had 1 string. But as he grew in life, he got 2 strings. He got 3 strings. And finally then 4 strings. He's operating on a much fuller bandwidth here and a much fuller sound, but it's his choice at any given moment how he's going to respond. So he's in stage 5, but in the earlier text, in verse 42, he's actually operating down in here. But somehow this depletion of the cupboard, I think that's a key point. The famine was severe in the land. And over time, this pain, this depletion of resource brings him to a point here where now he responds differently. That's my explanation. Choice. We don't become robots, but we can operate out of a much larger perspective as we move through these stages. So, the question to you and I this morning, and I'll leave this with you. Here's a guy, you and I, looking into the cupboard, and I've got this question: how has cupboard depletion affected your grip? The point of this photograph this morning is upper is an occasion, full cupboards, tight grip, an impasse, and in the lower portion of the photograph was empty cupboard, loose grip. Do you know that scenario? Do you know, and of course it's a rhetorical question, and the emphatic answer is yes. Yeah, I think all of us in this room know what it's like to have a tight grip. Life has pressed into us to a point at the pain level and of the depletion level and of the limited resource level that we all know to some degree that effect on all of us to loosen our grip, which is an amazing grace of God. And what has been my story in this whole scenario of full cupboard and affecting on grip, empty cupboard, depletion of resource, and the loosening of the grip. And that is where we will leave it for this week. David.
One other, to me, real interesting thread that parallels everything that you're saying, especially the Jacob versus the Isaac and everything else, but I was struck, and I'd never seen it like this way before. I think anyone who's a father can probably identify with this. It's back in chapter 42, verse 1. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" So he starts there, do something.
Okay, yeah.
Well, later on they do something. No! You don't do that.
Boy, that is yes. That's a fuller picture.
That's part of this.
Yeah. Do something, don't do something.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
I have an announcement. My daughter is part of a